the subject of suicide isn't to be trifled with. Suicide is a very serious thing, and when people laugh about it, it's not to be taken lightly. If somebody's talking about suicide, you got to take them at their word. It's not something to be scoffed at. It's not something to be joked about. But I remember Kurt Cobain. I used to like Nirvana when I was a teenager, and I remember when Kurt Cobain killed himself, and it was a tragedy. It was he was a hero even before he killed himself. But after he killed himself, he became like this bigger type of hero, this cult kind of figure through his suicide. The whole theme of the suffering artist, and he kills himself because life is so unbearable. His soul is too beautiful for the harshness and brutality of life. That kind of ideas came through after he took his life. And people who commit suicide, they're looking for something better than this life, than what this life can offer them. But I am so sure, because it's like what Shakespeare said, the quote but that the dread of something after death. That's what stops most people from killing themselves. If they're unhappy in this life, a lot of people might stop themselves from killing themselves, that they dread something might be worse on the other side. And some of the things that I've read about suicide, and I wouldn't like to experience what's on the other side after having committed suicide. I don't know, of course, but I'm sure it wouldn't be a good situation when you're crossing over into another life, which I believe we all do after we die. I never really thought of suicide myself. It's funny, because in my 20s, I won't say I had suicidal thoughts, but there was definitely stages where I didn't care if I lived or died. There was definitely times in my 20s where I didn't care if I lived or died, to be quite honest. But, and I was, and in my 20s, surprisingly enough, I used to think of death a lot. Death was always something that was on my mind. It was something that I thought about. It was something that I wondered about. It was a mystery, the mystery of death. You see, when you're in your 20s and your teens, you seem to have this, be preoccupied with the whole mystery of death. What is death? What is it? It's like when you're a child, it's something you don't think about. Then when you get into your teens, you start thinking about it more. And then in your 20s, when you're just becoming mature, fully mature, the reality of death hits you, and you realize that it's a fact of life, and there's almost this kind of push against it, or this urge to try to understand it, because the harsh reality of death hits you more so in your 20s than in any other stage of your life. And then in your 30s, there's this acceptance of it, and there's this acceptance of life. I'm in my 40s now, and I think more of, having a good time and living life to the fullest. And I hardly think of death at all, It's something that I've come to terms with. We're all going to die. I'm going to die. And I believe that when we die, it's just a passing through it's like going from this room into another room. That's my belief. I could be wrong, of course, but that's my belief. Going back to Kurt Cobain, and when I think F. Scott Fitzgerald said that, he wrote The Great Gatsby, but he said, "Show me a hero and I'll write you a tragedy." And it's true, because just look at the heroes who in our culture who we celebrate. Elvis, John Lennon, who else do we? James Dean, all these guys who died early. Kurt Cobain, we celebrate them, we put them on pedestals more because of the tragedies of their deaths, because they died in a tragic circumstance. So Suicide, it's a very, very serious thing. It's something to be taken very seriously. When people talk about it, we shouldn't joke about it or kind of laugh about it. It's something that it should be taken seriously. I've had friends who have died by their own hands, by suicide. It's not a pleasant thing for those who are left behind, grieving them. And I suspect that when people do kill themselves, they must be very, very sick or possessed of some sort of thinking that isn't their own, because they wouldn't want to inflict that kind of hurt and pain on the people that they leave behind, on the people that they love. So they're not in their right minds. The only way I can rationalize it is that they become possessed of some other sort of thinking. Some other sort of thinking gets hold of them, and that's what causes them to take their lives. Because why would you want to hurt people that you love, that you leave behind? And they will ultimately be hurt if you decide to take your own life and gamble that what is to come is better than what you have now.